The times where people ignore the red flags and say, let's just keep pushing, those are the times where you fail. I mean, I acknowledge I have a massive unfair advantage by, having the entertainment industry as sort of this microphone or this boost that I get to, sort of help promote my businesses with. That's sometimes hard as a woman because, you question if you're being difficult or if you're too in your head.
They begged me not to show it to them. It was actually 3,000, but who's counting? And the movie wasn't done yet. No, we were still editing it. It was close. And also Colleen was so involved in this. She's such a great filmmaker. She was able to stand up for the book.
She just received her response, and wow, that is not what her team was looking for, because Judge Louis Limon recently rendered a decision that divides this entire case in half following months and months of court filings and demands for damages that may have reached hundreds of millions of dollars. You will see why one side is quietly rejoicing tonight while the other is making statements in an attempt to spin a result that is actually not the victory they were looking for once you see what is actually hidden within this verdict. Since this is where it all starts, let us start with the headline figure. Blake Lively was suing Wayfair for punitive damages as well as triple damages. For those of you who are not familiar with legal jargon, triple damages refers to tripling the initial damages amount. She was claiming that Wayfair's countersuit against her was wholly baseless, that it was brought maliciously, and that, as the winner of that battle, she should be compensated handsomely for having to defend herself against it. We are discussing a claim that may have been worth hundreds of millions of dollars, according to some estimates. And despite everything, including the public story, the requests, and everything else, she received nothing. There is not a single dollar of punitive damages or triple damages left on the table, because it all boils down to a single technical element that her legal team seems to have either misjudged or gambled on. In any case, the explanation is actually one of the more intriguing legal breakdowns to emerge from this entire episode. Lively filed this fee claim in accordance with Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 54DE. Additionally, the judgment declared that 54D tightly restricts its application to expenses and attorney's fees in wording that could not have been more straightforward. It has absolutely no procedure for awarding compensatory damages, treble damages, or any type of punitive damages. The judge clarified that you cannot just make a motion after the case is over and ask the court to give you a number if you want actual damages in federal court. The system is not intended to operate that way. From the beginning, you must go through the full official litigation process, formal pleadings, the discovery procedure, and, above all, a jury trial in accordance with the Constitution's 7th Amendment. No matter how strongly you believe you deserve a damages award, you cannot bypass the full legal system and get directly to a damages figure through a post-judgment motion. This particular element truly reveals the judge's level of patience during the entire proceedings. It appears that Lively's counsel made some sort of argument that the court was free to ignore these procedural details if it so desired, and the judge immediately responded to that reasoning down without any doubt at all. In essence, he stated, "I will not utilize my judgment in your favor just because you claim that I have the authority to bend these regulations. It is not a legal argument. That is requesting a personal exemption from a federal judge because you truly want one. Furthermore, most federal judges dislike being asked the question. Therefore, if you have been following this entire story from the start and no one has informed you of this ruling yet, you are at the perfect spot at this moment. This is when the narrative really gets difficult, so hit the like button right now. Regardless of whatever side they have been supporting, there is an impending shock that will startle everyone, because this is what makes this decision so intriguing. For Lively, this was not a complete loss. For this reason, legal analysts who have been following this case are characterizing it as a middle-of-the-road decision rather than a definitive victory for either party. The judge did, in fact, award her costs and attorney fees, but, and I really cannot emphasize this enough, only for a single, extremely narrowly defined aspect of the case as a whole. In particular, the section in which she defended herself against Wayfair's countersuit for slander. Not the year and months of litigation, not the complete lawsuit. She has been battling on several fronts, but not all of them. Just one piece of defamation defense. Furthermore, the legal justification for his gift of even that much is genuinely astute. Additionally, it explains why this case has developed in the manner that it has, making it worthwhile to comprehend. State law establishes whether an individual is even substantively entitled to attorney fees in federal lawsuits that rely on diverse jurisdiction or supplemental jurisdiction, as this case does. On this issue, the federal court adopts the state's regulations. Additionally, a victorious defendant in a retaliatory defamation suit is expressly entitled to fees and costs under California Civil Code Section 47. This is where things start to become really interesting. The fact that California's anti-SLAPP law, which which is often the main instrument employed in circumstances similar to this one, cannot be used in federal court was well known to everyone watching this case. For a very long period, that has been established law. Thus, you might initially believe that Lively's fee argument was doomed to fail. However, the anti-SLAPP statute's disqualifying language is not present in Section 47(1). It is a distinct law, drafted differently, and it passed where the more well-known measure failed. The judge even went so far as to point out that the act seems to have been purposefully crafted in an ambiguous manner without a strict set of procedural guidelines in order to provide courts flexibility to apply it in unique circumstances such as this one. Furthermore, the judge made it clear that a defendant's right to fees under this legislation is eliminated just because the underlying case was dropped early at the pleading stage rather than proceeding to trial. Therefore, the law actually worked in Lively's favor on that front, on that particular piece. She is entitled to expenses for specifically defending herself against the allegations of defamation. But hold on, because this is where things become extremely complicated and where one word, malice, determines how this fee question turned out. This is how the rule operates under Section 47.1. If you make certain kinds of statements and someone sues you for defamation because of those statements, and you win the lawsuit, the person who sued you usually has to pay your legal fees as the losing party, unless it can be demonstrated that your initial statements were made maliciously. The privilege and the right to fees both vanish if malice is shown. This is what is so intriguing about it. In fact, Wayfair correctly claimed malice in their initial case against Lively. In their brief, they explained that Lively had cause to know that her claims were untrue. When she made them, they were untrue. From the start of this fight, that argument was on the table. This is where Wayfair's legal approach to this particular fee motion seems to have entirely collapsed. Wayfair did not ask for discovery when it came time to really defend this specific motion, which is solely about whether Lively receives fees. An evidentiary hearing was not requested by them. They had every chance to delve further and make a strong case for malice. Rather, they gave the judge precisely 3 exhibits to consider. Of those 3 exhibits, 2 dealt with purported incidents that took place in New Jersey. Additionally, the judge decided that those materials had little bearing on the issue of malice. They did not address whether Lively knew her assertions were untrue when she made them. Instead, they focused primarily on jurisdictional concerns and the actual locations of the events. A deposition from Greenberg, Lively's own talent agent, was the next exhibit. In a statement about actions related to the studio, Wayfair, and Justin Baldoni, Greenberg once used the word extortion during this deposition. On the surface, that seems like the perfect smoking gun for Wayfair. However, the judge looked into it and found that there was no clear indication that when Greenberg used that term, he was specifically talking to Lively's accusations of sexual harassment rather than a totally other and different problem. Specifically, it was said that Lively had threatened to leave the set unless she was granted authority over the screenplay and editing process. 2 very distinct things. Furthermore, during his deposition, Greenberg admitted that he could not recall his original thoughts or intentions when he wrote that message. Because Wayfair's evidence on this particular motion did not immediately link the sexual harassment claims to any notion of false charges, the judge determined that there is just no proof of malice on this specific record for this specific motion. Additionally, Lively is entitled to her costs for that defamation defense section since the privilege under Section 47.1 is upheld in the absence of proof of malice. To be honest, this is precisely the reason you should immediately subscribe to this channel, because the next aspect of this decision is that individuals who are debating it online in both ways are getting it entirely incorrect. Because practically everyone is misinterpreting this order, the judge provided a footnote that must be properly understood. He stressed that Lively herself did not behave maliciously and that his previous dismissal of the Wayfair's charge never really held up. Only Ryan Reynolds and a producer named Sloan were judged to have lacked personal malice in that earlier ruling, and the reasons behind it was particular. Neither of them had first-hand knowledge of any of the claimed harassment episodes. As a result, they had no independent reason to doubt Lively's description of what had allegedly occurred. That is the whole extent of what was previously decided. It says absolutely nothing about the veracity of Lively's first claims or whether she fabricated them maliciously. Put otherwise, this decision does not support her initial allegations. Throughout the entire investigation, there has never been a factual determination that the allegations she made were true. Legally and factually, the judge's decision made it quite evident that all of her initial complaint's claims, including her allegations of sexual harassment, had previously been rejected or decided at summary judgment. All of the claims were legally rejected since none of them satisfied the necessary level of proof. Furthermore, the court's formal ruling on the record is unaffected by her personal belief that everything she stated actually occurred as she claimed. In terms of actual money, what does all of this actually mean? To be honest, we still do not know everything, and a significant portion of this novel revolves on that uncertainty. The court must now go through the entire case, claim by claim, and determine which parts were specifically related to the defamation defense and which were about entirely different issues that had nothing to do with defamation. According to the judge's ruling that the fees being awarded are subject to what is known as apportionment. This involves determining how to treat overlapping claims claims, in which the same underlying behavior may support both a non-defamation claim that is not eligible for fees at all and a defamation-related fee award. Further rounds of motions and briefs are necessary for that apportionment process, sides prior to anyone arriving at a precise figure. Regarding this, the judge was clear and concise. He made it clear that he is not making any conclusions on the proper monetary amount at this time. He only clearly decided that she was entitled to compensation for that particular defamation defense portion of the case. Depending solely on how that allocation procedure transpires in the upcoming months, the real amount may be rather small or it may turn out to be significant. Let us assemble the whole picture, because the complete form of this decision becomes much more apparent when you take a step back and consider everything together. Not a problem. None. There are no punitive damages. None. Not $200 million. Some internet users were speculating about a $300 million windfall. Not even close to that. Instead, she receives a partial fee award that covers a narrowly defined portion of a single case. The precise cash amount will still need to be determined through more legal maneuvering that has not even begun yet. Additionally, a person with first-hand knowledge of the Wayfair and Bald One side's reaction to this decision claims that their camp is seeing this as a true victory. And to be honest, it makes perfect sense when you realize what they were truly terrified of. A relatively small fee award or a single motion's share was never the main source of worry. On that side of the case, the true concern that kept people up at night was the potential for a huge damages award that could reach the hundreds of millions of dollars. A sum that big could have been truly disastrous, the kind that permanently alters people's lives and businesses. And that just did not occur. Now that is totally off the table, with no way to return to it via this specific route. Only the very short period of time during which Wayfair's countersuit against Lively was actively being litigated is relevant to the fees being assessed here. That represents a very tiny portion of the entire sum of money. Over the previous year and several months, Lively has already devoted time to pursuing her own initial case, and she is still solely responsible for paying for all of that expenditure on her own case, entirely unrelated to anything in this decision, regardless of the final outcome of the apportionment process. Blake Lively walks away from this particular ruling with a partial attorney's fee award covering one narrow portion of one case, an amount that still needs to be calculated through further proceedings, and absolutely no acknowledgement anywhere in this order that any of her initial underlying allegations were ever proven to be true. This is after months and months of filings, late-night court documents, public narrative battles playing out across social media and entertainment press, and demands for what could have been a transformative, life-altering sum of money and damages. Truly the current state of affairs on Screen Queen. Please hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments section below, and make sure you are subscribed to Screen Queen so you do not miss what happens when those fee numbers are actually filed with the court. If this breakdown helped you truly understand what this ruling means. The order itself is actually 47 or 48 pages of dense legal language with very few soundbites, because that process alone may take months, and there is probably more to come. Given how apportionment processes usually develop in situations like this,